Hi, everybody. This is Jenny Clark with Solvability, and we've got another session of Freedom Friday, and I'm so excited to have my friend Jason Lipton here with us today. Jason was one of the first people that I met when I came to Tampa Bay, and I remember meeting at his office, and it was just one of those things to watch a company go from 4 or 5 guys around a table to where you are today, Jason. I just love seeing it, and he's going to talk today about really the people process and what it takes to grow as a federal contractor. And we've also got Lucy Flynn coming to us from GovCon Pay, which is a organization that really helps companies that are in federal contracting with automating their whole onboarding process. And that's a big challenge for any federal contractor. So Jason, why don't you just take it away?
Wow. Okay. So I've never been to one of these Freedom Fridays. So you want me to explain how it is that we did what we did, or what is important? So I think one of the things that we learned along the way, and we've pretty much doubled in size every year for the last 6 or 7 years. So hopefully that trend continues. And when we did meet you, Jenny, as you said, we were 4 guys sitting around the table. Fortunately, those 4 guys we're still here, but we have 180 other employees that work for us now. And I sort of, as I've explained to you before in past interviews, took on the role of the back office / business guy that maybe it was by default because I didn't have a level of program expertise that a lot of my partners had.
I think it was because you weren't in the room when they decided that. You'd gone out to lunch, right?
It might have been it. I wasn't in the room where it happened. But that meeting with you was actually pretty vital, because it was there that I realized how much there was to running a government contracting company. And you sort of introduced me to the ideal of fractional support, if you wanted me to get into that. And I believe Lynn is on this call, and that's one of the people that we work with. I don't work with her specifically, but that is what Payroll Networks has become, right? So, okay, good. I'm glad I got that right. But it's only, at least from my perspective, you start a company, and then for the first 2 years, you're sort of as good as the people that you know and the past performance that you have, right? So your partner's as a telecom guy, so you cash in a couple chips, and you call the people that you know in the telecom GovCom background, and you squeeze what you could get out of those contracts. But then eventually you have to become a processes and procedures company, right? After you've exhausted all of the people that you know. And then I think that's where, and I don't mean to just keep praising Jenny here, but that's where I've become just a loyalist to her GovCon and the GovCon process. And I know GovCon means the industry, but when I say GovCon, I'm talking about the GovCon that Jenny runs every year, or the seminar. And it's from there that almost every aspect of the back office and the business management that we do has come from a relationship that I've made by going to these seminars. And I can't, I guess, stress the importance of you have to, if you're in GovCon, you have to have people that know GovCon. And I sort of learned that lesson the hard way by having people that didn't necessarily have GovCon. And I think, without getting into too much detail, Jenny, I think you remember the days when we had our funding come from a company that wasn't set up for GovCon specifically, and that was just a nightmare. But hopefully what I just said actually made some kind of point, but that's
Well,
where
Jason, I think that what we're talking about also is how does a company grow that fast, and what do you have to have lined up? And it's financial, but it's also like you even have, when you win a big contract, you find yourself doing recruiting all the time, right?
correct.
And
Yes.
those are like the peaks and valleys of being in a federal contracting business.
Yes. So I say this controversially, but I think everything comes down to staffing, and a lot of government contractors, especially in the professional services side, where we tend to do most of our business, it comes down to your staffing capabilities. I think when I was younger, I had this notion in my head that a company like SAIC or Northrop Grumman, they just had, a bench full of 100 people that were just sitting there waiting to get put on an assignment. But as I realized, they don't have that either. And we're all competing for the same amount, the same people with the same skills, So my background was in commercial staffing when I was in my 20s and early 30s. And I'm not going to say how many years past those ages I am now, but it's a significant amount of years. But I tried to bring that sort of staffing mentality to GovCon, and our staffing arm is robust, and they're highly compensated individuals that work on traditional bonus structures that we had from when I was doing commercial staffing. So we're always, I think, leading with our staffing capability, because at the end of the day, you have to have the people. And one of the contracts that we have right now is it's an IDIQ with 3 companies on it, and we get these task orders that come out, and we have 2 weeks to respond to them. And sometimes they're 10, 12 person task orders. And part of the response is you have to show who your team's going to be. So we have to come up with a team of 12 people and write to them all within 14 days. And you can't do that without a full-time team of recruiters.
Well, and the other
Can
thing,
I ask a quick question here?
Of course, Russ.
So you have a staffing, your company is a staffing agency, and when is it, or is it not?
No, we're not a staffing agency. We're a government contracting company. What I meant to say, and maybe I didn't do it eloquently enough, is I've come from a staffing agency background. So I try to bring that mentality to it a little bit as far as our recruiting arm goes. But we're definitely not a staffing agency.
So
and I
what are
think
you providing to the government? And the reason I'm asking this is where I'm going with the question. I always tell people you can't do business with the government until you can do business. And
Right.
once you know what your business is, then you can go and look in the government contracting space and say, these are the requirements that the government has, and we can fill those requirements with our company. So let's apply for that contract. And so I was trying to make the connection between what you do and how you leverage that into the government contracting space, and then leverage that towards your growth.
Okay, right. So I guess what I would say, and I don't know if I'm answering your question specifically enough, but having been on the just pure staffing side, I think that the one of the big differences is in being mission focused as opposed to when you're in a staffing agency, you fill the roles, you put the people on assignment, and you sort of forget about it, right? Whereas what we do, we're managing the projects, we're reporting on the projects, we're seeing through the projects, and we're responsible for the success of the projects and ultimately to the government customer. So there's a similarity that's not always as distinctive of a difference as you would like, but the difference is in the mission and your responsibility to the customer. But also, like I said earlier, at the end of the day, most professional services is staffing. So there's semantics there of whether you're a staffing agency or not. But yes, ma'am.
Question. Well, what does your company do to support the government, and who are your customers?
Okay, that's a fair question, right? And maybe I should have started with all of that, but I
It's all good.
But believe it or not, so when we started, we were a mass notification company, which is the furthest thing from staffing out there, but it was the expertise of my partners, where we were doing soup to nuts installation and equipment buying of large giant voice systems. We were vendor agnostic and just an integrator of large giant voice systems. And we were installing those. We had an enterprise-wide Marine Corps contract. And that was just a lot of buying equipment, installing it at various Marine bases throughout the country. And that got us going enough to keep the money going in, but the industry itself kind of wasn't sustainable for large scale growth. And then we also have a capability, and it sort of carried over from a previous company that we all worked, where we support one of the largest government contractors overseas in force protection systems, which is sort of related to mass notification, but in this, we're just providing the personnel in, I would say, IT infrastructure for base defense systems, and those are forward deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we have about 30 people over there, and that becomes a capability all in itself, because you can't just start a company and say, I want to start deploying people to Iraq and Afghanistan. There's a lot that goes into that. And the reason we were able to grow our share so much in that was because of our ability on the back end to manage those people and get them ready and deploy them, because there's various steps, which I'm not really that involved in on the program side, but and then also that leads to having to have better accounting systems because of all the different CLINs and SINs, and that we have to have our project structures like 7 levels deep in detail, because that's ultimately a cost plus contract up to the end customer. And then we have our biggest growth, and our biggest prime area has been on the federal civilian side with the Department of Commerce, where we have an IDIQ with only us and 2 other companies. And that's actually staff support services. And it's anywhere from HR and administrative professionals through the highest level of IT with SCI and so forth. It just depends. The Department of Commerce is pretty big, and they have offices all over the country. The MOAT works primarily in DC, but we have some out in Colorado and in other locations. But that is basically whatever they need. It comes out on a task order level. And we have, I think, 30 active task orders right now with the Department of Commerce.
Wow, that's a lot to keep up with. You
It
know, what I
is,
think is
and
so fascinating, Jason, is when you think about it, is you started in one area, you gained expertise, you gained a reputation, you saw some opportunities, and then you went to the same customer possibly and said, here's some other things that we can do. And this is how a lot of companies do grow in federal contracting. It's a couple guys get together and they've been talking about this at lunch for a long time, and they finally go and do it. And then creating the company, but then figuring out how to grow it is a big piece of the challenge. And I think what's unique about your approach and where your background really came in is you understanding that it's going to take a lot to get the right people at the right time to the right place. And I guess one of the challenges that a lot of federal contractors have is finding people that can do the work and can go overseas or have the clearances. And then of course, for your Department of State or your other one, it's, you got to find people willing to work in this facility downtown doing this kind of work. Right. So it's like a lot of time spent on USA clearance jobs and things like that, I guess.
Right.
How do you find your people, and how do you differentiate yourself from other companies in the government contracting space?
In regard to us trying to differentiate ourselves to the customer or to the people that we're trying to hire?
Really to the customer, because they don't know you. And I think what's odd also about federal contracting is you've got people all over the country that you might not have met before you hired them.
Right.
And maybe in the past you would go visit them from time to time, but with COVID, it's been a little even more remote. And navigating through all of the communications for that has also probably been just a huge, big issue.
Yeah, it's been tough, right? And that leads to another area that I hope we get to if we have time. But the main thing, believe it or not, is I don't necessarily think it's because we've gone out there and gotten in front of people and done the best capture or anything like that. I think it's because of the team that we have, especially with my partners. We write really good proposals, right? So it's our ability to write a proposal, and we always say we're going to force the customer to come up with a reason why they want to say no to us. And if you don't give them a reason, there's really you should win the proposal, right? And then it comes down to pricing, which you've been very helpful in teaching us how to price stuff competitively. So the way we differentiate is price, our proposal, and then on top of that, you could get away with that once or twice, but if you can't perform, you're never going to get another contract again. So then we have to ultimately perform, and I think our project manager that we have on staff, and as well as our CPARs, we're at the point where we could take our CPAR ratings and our past performance and show all the customers that have been happy with us. So that helps as well. But in the beginning, it's just tough. You have to really know what you're doing as far as writing really good proposals and pricing accurately.
Well, I
Did
think
that
that's
answer the
why it makes
question?
sense for so many people that do go into government contracting, realize that you got to have somebody that has been there before and knows what it looks like.
Right. And fortunately, my partner, Mike, has been around a long time.
Yes, exactly. So tell me a little bit about what it was like to navigate through COVID for you guys and how you communicate with your employees, because that must have been a big challenge when they were asking, what are the answers? And you don't have them quite yet, but you do now.
Right. So, it was tough. And I guess we're still in a situation where we don't have we're not like, oh, hey, looking back, we could have done this. I think we're still going through it. And maybe a year from now, we'll look back and see things that we could have done differently. So we were fortunate enough that the federal, that our people that were forward deployed, were considered essential enough that they were not interrupted that much. However, what did happen was that travel was stopped. So we had a lot of people that were on R&R that couldn't get back to theater, and a lot of people that were on theater that couldn't get back to R&R. So we had people that had to stay at their deployment for almost like a year, it turned out, when they're supposed to come back every 6 months. And that was tough. And that's a lot of communication. And we probably were flexible enough and in a fortunate enough position that we were able to pay people and following the rules, so we took a gamble on paying people. We also were fortunate enough to get a PPP loan that enabled us to pay people to stay home. But we only, I think, out of our 150 some odd employees, we only had to pay about 5 or 6 people to stay home. And the federal government did a good job of setting everybody up remote to work remotely. Now, I think there was a mad scramble in the beginning there where everybody didn't have the IT infrastructure to work at home and set up their VPN. So if I'm recalling correctly, it seems like years ago at this point, but it was probably only 6 months ago. we had a scramble we had to buy some laptops and help people set up their VPNs and so forth. But now that that's set up, it's pretty good. And then it just comes down to the project managers having more daily contact with our people, setting up more phone trees and things like that. One of the things that we're exploring right now, and maybe you could do another part of it with GovCon payroll or payroll networks in general, is they have this product called Mojo, which we're exploring, which is more of a performance management tool that we're really going to need coming up, because I think with all those people working at federal buildings in Washington, D.C., I think there's going to be remote for a long time. We still have most of our staff is working remote at this point. And I think another big issue that's coming up that I have to explore is that nobody's really taking PTO anymore. So we're having, it's an issue. We have to come up with a company policy of what to do with all these PTO balances, because it's exceeding what I think we're comfortable with as a company of people banking their hours. So that's a conversation we could have offline, but it's one of the challenges that's popping up. Are you raising your hand?
No, not really. But I think what you're talking about Emily, were you saying something?
No, I was just thinking that I can understand that.
Yeah.
Why take time off if you can't go anywhere? May as well just be home and work.
Right. And so it creates a big liability for Jason. If everybody comes back off and they all want to take their vacation at once, there's a lot of cash going out the door and no revenue to cover it. So we don't want to do that either.
So yeah, so it's kind of and we actually went through that 2 years ago, which was called the government shutdown, right?
Right.
Everybody took their PTO for like 3 weeks there. We were just that was horrible. Hopefully we don't have to go through that again. But
Well, somebody was asking me this question today, so I'm going to throw it at you. A lot of people have said, you know, the new work we had planned to bid on is all slid to the right, so we're not doing that bidding. We're busier than ever because money that was previously planned for operational support, since it can't be used for that, they're shifting it to other pieces of the project. But the other question comes up about, you know, what are people doing to decide how their future will be affected by, are we going back to work? And that's a really tough question. And the other thing is, I think that we're kind of tired of all being in the same space, but at the same time, I just wonder what we're going to do, and if there's a timeline for going, you know, for getting on the other side. Who do you ask that kind of question?
You know, it's tough, right? So in one sense, with the people that are working in other countries, I feel like we've gotten to the other side of that because they resumed travel, and we don't. I think this last week, the last guy that was stuck in the United States got back over there, and the last person that, you know, wanted to come home and see his family was, you know, so we're on the other side of it as far as our work in the theater. A bigger thing that we're struggling with is not so much the people that are working for us asking when we're getting on the other side. We're struggling with trying to get people to recruit people to come to our jobs, because people don't want to leave the work that they have right now. And we're also having an issue, which is this isn't part of the question, but because our work is so dependent on the federal government, and the federal government is in such a transitional period right now, we're having people that maybe have 3 months left on the contract that are looking for other work, that we can't really promise them what's going to happen with the next administration and if their project is going to be continued. So I think our bigger issues right now, other than COVID, is really the transition into the next administration. I know that wasn't your question, but that's kind of.
Well, in a way it is. Yeah, in a way it was, because I think everybody's saying, okay, things are changing. How do they change? And what do I know? What do I need to know? And how do I figure that out?
Right.
And it's not like there's a person you can call and ask, because it's going to be a combination of unknown people we don't know. So,
Right.
Hey, Jason, I really appreciate your being on today and being a part of it. And I love watching the Ardent Eagle success story.
Thanks. I'm sure I'm going to be thinking about it for the next couple hours of things that I could have said better. So I hopefully I gave you a little bit, but I'm sure I could have said some things better.
No, I think you covered exactly what we needed to. And this is all supposed to be like a conversation around a kitchen table anyway. What do you really think, and how do we need to do things? So
Right.
I really appreciate your being on. If people need to reach you, what's the easiest way for them to reach you?
Probably through email, which is my first name dot last name at ardent-eagle.com.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for being on.